This is Dave Jackson, and this is the Earn and Invest podcast.
I'm going to do something a little different with the intro today. I'm going to share something deeply personal, and then I'm going to tell you an anecdote that is kind of funny. Kinda. First, for the difficult stuff. As I've shared before, my dad died suddenly when I was 8 years old. You've heard that. But what I've never talked about is that a few weeks preceding his untimely death, I had a dream that he died, and I was thrilled because I could now have all the cool stuff he kept in his workshop. His pocket knives, his tools, other doodads. I mean, I was 8 years old. When he actually died, I became convinced that it was my fault, that it was because of my dream, my selfishness, or ultimately the fact that if I had just been a better kid, he would have lived. I mean, come on. I was 8 years old. Although I have logically moved on over the years from such thinking, I have a tendency to return to these childish feelings when faced with something hard. Whether relationships, work, or even podcasting, I often work so hard I leave my heart exhausted and exposed on the ground, and then decide, regardless of the outcome, that I have failed. If I just would have been good enough, worthy enough, my father wouldn't have died. The relationship would have worked. The podcast would get more downloads. If I had just been better. And now for a somewhat related and kind of funny anecdote. Kinda. I got my first podcasting-related injury last month at the Economy Conference. I was helping Joe Saul-Sehy do a live podcast episode of the Stacking Benjamins podcast in front of 400 people. After the show, I was walking out of the staging area, a room created with steel poles draped with fabric, and the structure collapsed and one of those poles smashed into my face just below my left eye. I won't give all the gory details, but let's just say I was lucky on a number of accounts to not be more hurt. So, how does this all connect? Well, podcasting is hard. And today I have Dave Jackson of the School of Podcasting, can you say legend, to talk about his 800th episode over 16 years. But I don't want you to mistake today's theme to be about podcasting. We're talking about doing hard things. Maybe it's your marriage, or the business you founded, or your path to financial independence. What do you do when the thing you love metaphorically, or not so metaphorically, wallops you in the face? How do you get past all the emotional bullshit from past traumas, the comparison game, and often lack of success to do the things your heart really desires, the hard things, for years? Dave Jackson is an award-winning Hall of Fame podcaster who has been podcasting since April of 2005. His show, The School of Podcasting, has been downloaded millions of times, and he recently dropped his 800th episode. The man, the myth, the legend, Dave Jackson, I'm so very happy to welcome you to Earn and Invest. Dave, I apologize. I'm going to start you with a little bit of a doozy of a question. Tell me some of the important things you've sacrificed for podcasting.
Boy, that's fun, because you can say things like television, but you said important things. And television isn't important. You can argue that rest and relaxation and giving your brain a break is important, but do I really need to watch, the Soup Nazi again? Do I really need to see The Trouble with Tribbles or whatever? So a lot of TV and a lot of just that kind of stuff. I am the guy that will catch himself occasionally watching Ted Nugent videos at 2 a.m. on YouTube going, wait, I came here looking for, some demo of a software. How did I end up at California Jam 77? I'm better at now. I treat YouTube almost like not so much a roach motel, but I know I'm going into a dangerous place. Facebook is a dangerous place. And I know why, because they're programmed to suck you in. So this isn't a sacrifice because I live in Cleveland, but like football and sports, like all our teams pretty much blow. So I'm not really missing anything there. And so I don't get to watch millionaires talk about things that they have absolutely no control over about the other millionaires who are playing a game for the, it's a waste of, I don't want to say it's a waste of time. Again, it's an escape. But at times it's been, I don't know what I'm missing on Sunday because my family knows not to contact me on Sunday because that's podcast day. So there may be some great things going on and they're like, oh, we should call Uncle Dave. You don't want to call Uncle Dave on Sunday because we know what the answer is going to be. So those kind of things I think sometimes, but they're, you have to always with anything weigh the pros and the cons. And so I think it's still bizarre to me that I can say I'm going to be in whatever Beaver Mud, Mississippi, insert, little cow town somewhere. I'm going to be there in, July, blah, blah, blah. If anybody's around and wants to have dinner, it'd be great. And there's that voice in your head that goes, nobody's going to show up. Nobody's, what do you think? You have a listener in Beaver Mud? No way. And almost immediately somebody I can't believe you're coming to Beaver Mud. Can we please go to, Chuck's Steakhouse? And I'm like, it's amazing. So those kind of things where you're like, anytime, I always joke that, and it's true. I started in my brother's basement after getting divorced next to a water heater with a flush pipe behind me, hoping that nobody did laundry. And, that's where I started. And I never thought anybody would listen to what I had to say. And I've had one person that said I saved his life because I gave him purpose when he was ready to blow his brains out. And you're like, wait, hold on. I'm just talking about microphones and bandwidth. I didn't sign up for that. And to a certain extent, your sanity, because you can really, when you talk about, we want our podcast to be better. And it's so easy to go down. When I've seen people that started long after I started blow by me to where I'm just eating their dust. And I'm like, wait, what am I doing? Did I miss something somewhere? And so that's kind of hard to get used to, but I always go back to, well, okay, what am I doing right? Who am I trying to help? What am I trying to give them? What do they need? I don't know how I ended up with the teacher gene because that's just what it is. When all else fails, okay, let's go back to helping people because that's somehow gives me the dopamine kick to keep on going. And so I told my ex-wife, I said, you're missing I'm going to tell you my kryptonite. And she goes, what? I said, start a sentence with, will you help me? I said, because I have a really hard time saying no to that. And she never quite got it. I guess that's some of the things I've sacrificed. Sleep. In the early days in 2005, I went down that rabbit hole. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Well, that can be arranged, if you do that enough. So that's a really dumb thing where, I'm not serious unless I'm operating on 4 hours sleep. That's for wimps. That's the people that push that agenda. I'm like, really? That's the culture you want to promote here. So, but those are some of the things I think I've sacrificed.
Talking about helping people, let's go back to 2005, sitting in your brother's basement. What was your why? And did money have anything to do with it?
Oh, yeah. I always joke the very reason that I started the School of Podcasting is the top thing I tell people, don't do this. I was going back to college. I'd been teaching in the corporate world for a decade, but my degree was in electronic engineering. I'd fallen into training. And so I went to get another job in training and they went, you don't have a degree in education. And I went, but look at my resume. And they went, we don't care. And so I had to go back to school. And my brother was nice enough to say, hey, just stay here. Cause I was getting ready to move into an apartment. He goes, no, just stay here. You get to figure out what you want to be when you grow up. He goes, just stay here. You're helping with the kids. This is great. You live in the basement. I never see you. And my friend had said, hey, podcasting is going to be the next big thing. And the other thing they were saying is memberships are going to be the next big thing. And I went, so if podcasting is going to be the next big thing, and let's put these two together. So, and I'd seen so many trends that I was like, I should try that. I should try that. And never took a step. And I was like, doggone it. This time I'm taking a step. That was part of it. Was definitely, I thought this will help me because I'm going to need books. I got to keep myself on a cell phone and car insurance and things like that. So my brother was putting a roof over my head, but I kind of had to provide everything else. And I thought this will be great. And then after about finding 15 people that I would spend 5 to 10 minutes explaining what a podcast was. And they would say, I'd say, no, you don't need an iPod. No, you don't need this. No, you didn't. It's kind of like it would take forever. And then when they finally understood what it was, they'd go, yeah, I don't need one of those. So I was like, oh, this is crazy. So my why was, when I had my first podcast, I had a guy from Nuremberg, Germany, Michael Van Laar, and he had sent me a voicemail. So number one, it's this musicians podcast. Some guy on the other side, I'm in like Cowtown, Ohio, and some guy on the other side of the planet found my show, and not only found it, but liked it. And I went, whoa, this is amazing. So it scratched every itch I had. So it was kind of techie. It was as creative as you want to be. Because in the early days of podcast, they had smashed the box and lit it on fire. It was just, everybody was doing things that were so not radio. So it was kind of techie, super creative, and I got to help people. And so I was just like, I remember vividly sitting in a chair and thinking, this could change the world. Like this really, if this catches on, there's a huge potential here. And so that's kind of why I jumped in, unfortunately, with the goal to make money quickly. And that is always the worst reason to start a podcast, unless you've got a list and an audience and everything else. But when you're starting from nothing, it's going to be a little frustrating.
And we're talking about doing things that are hard. School of Podcasting dropped episode 800 not that long ago. But back then you were at episode 1. How many episodes did you get in before you seriously thought of throwing in the towel? Like, was there a point where you're like, oh my God, I can't do this?
I don't think it was ever, I don't think I've ever really given up on podcasting. I've had podcasts that I have quit doing because there just comes a time, like right now I'm migrating one of my shows about weight loss to somebody else because I've just run out of different ways to say, eat less and exercise more. I'm just bored with it. I've never really gotten that bored with podcasting, but I realized quickly that, okay, we're going to need some more streams of income. So that's when I was like, okay, what do I know? What can I do? And I was like, okay, I can help people build websites. I can do guitar lessons. I'm already in a band, all these other things that I could do. So it was just a matter of, okay, so this podcasting thing is going to bring in a little bit of money, but not the money we thought it was going to. I also did something very stupid, and I didn't know this yet, right? You don't know the things that you know later. And I said, man, if I could get like 500 people to give me $5 a month. And so when I opened the School of Podcasting, it was $5 a month. And finally, a very good friend of mine said, hey, Dave, I have a question for you. And I go, what? And he goes, what else can you buy for $5 on the internet? And I went, oh, that's a good question. He goes, yeah. He goes, you know why nobody's signing up? Because there's no way that has any value because it's $5. He goes, I got that in my couch cushions. So that was when I went, oh, and that's where you learn by doing things and having good friends that tell you when you're doing stupid stuff. That's when I learned. I was like, okay, I still think this has potential. Not because it's not going as fast as I want because I'm bad, because I'm getting good feedback. It's just that nobody else on the planet knows what a podcast is yet. And so I remember it took about 3 years to where I finally started reaching people that said, hey, have you heard a podcast? And they go, oh yeah, I listen to the Daily Source Code. Or I was like, oh, really? Wow. Okay, cool. I'm like, have you ever thought of starting your own? And it was, you just learn as you go along, really.
It sounds like when you started, part of your idea of what success was making fast money. That obviously changed. How did it evolve over those first few years? Like from making money, what became your definition of being successful as a podcaster?
The thing that stops most people from starting a podcast is not the cost of the microphone. It's not the learning curve of what the heck is an RSS feed. It's getting out of their own way. I had a guy this year that has he's a pilot, has fought in multiple wars, is a keynote speaker. And I could not get him to press record. And I sat down and talked to him, and I realized he said, you got to understand, in the military, the last thing you want to do is look stupid. And I said, okay, well, you signed up for my membership site. Do you think I'm going to let you look stupid? I said, because if you look stupid, I kind of look stupid. I said, and I'm willing to work like side by side. However close you want me to work with you, I will work with you. And I think he just released episode 8, and he's like, Dave, I can't believe this. I got 500 people listening already. I go, I told you had good content. So, but I see that more and more. I watched a a thing on Netflix once with Garth Brooks. And here's a guy that had just been awarded in New York, like the top selling, like country artist, blah, 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 all sorts of accolades. And he's hidden himself in a hotel room because he's got to do a concert in Central Park.
Like in front of 1 million people, right? I think I remember that.
Yeah. And he's convinced that nobody's going to show up. And so and he's got the curtains pulled, the whole 9 yards. And so finally his wife goes out. She says, I have to look. And she comes back and he goes, she goes, Garth, they had to move the barricades or something like that. And he goes, because nobody's here. She's like, oh, no. They've already ran out of room. And he talks to this one guy and he said, well, as of a half hour ago, there were like 750,000 people here. And he goes, wait, you're telling me there's 750,000 people here now? And he goes, no, I'm telling you there's 750,000 people 30 minutes ago. And so it was so much fun to watch that, because we all have imposter syndrome, I think, in some ways or another. Something has happened that threw us a curveball. I end up walking people, I think, a lot through that. It's like I try to create a safe space. Like, look, I'm going to probably give you some tips on how this could be better and this and that. It's nothing personal. And we just have to make sure, because I don't want you to waste your time. I don't want you to put out a podcast I think my favorite flop is The Lone Ranger with Johnny Depp. They'd had the hamburger meal and all the toys and everything like that. There was only one problem, and that was a horrible movie. And so it doesn't matter how much you promote that. If it's not going to get the result that you want the consumer to get, it's not any good.
So let's talk about some of those curveballs. I listened to episode 800 of the School of Podcasting, and I noticed it was different. In fact, you yourself stated that you were breaking the format even from the moment you started the episode. It was a bit more somber, I think, than most of your episodes. Why now for you? What was special about that episode 800, and why was it time to be a little more serious?
Yeah, every 100 episodes I break format. So in episode 400, I was kidnapped by a morning zoo crew called Binky and the Wiz. So it's all theater. Episode 500. So episode 800, I was kind of like, all right, well, what are we going to talk about? And I was at a conference, and the topic of mental health and the fact that people have just come to the conclusion that, podcasting is hard. I had a guy send me a 10-minute voicemail that said, I don't think the gurus are being 100% honest with how much time it takes to do this. And he was kind of pointing the finger, but he's kind of like lumping me in with all this other stuff. So there was that, and just stuff that people just, I always, there's a running gag, and Joe Pardo started it, but he refers to me as the Dave Jackson. It's like, oh my gosh, it's the Dave Jackson. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. I tell them at the grocery store, and my groceries are not free. So like, what's the deal with that? And I've heard people say things. There was a thing once, somebody said, do we really need to hear Dave Jackson talk again at an event? And I was like, can we pick on somebody else? Because Dave Jackson works really hard on those talks and make sure he delivers. And so I thought, and I guess I just see in some cases other people getting into the space because of the money, because of the 100,000 that, or 100 million, or a lot of money that Joe Rogan got, that they're like, oh, there's money over there. We should come over there and try to get some of that. And they just spew puppy dogs and rainbows. There are a lot of unbelievably talented musicians in Nashville, Tennessee. They followed their dream. They moved to Nashville, and they're bartenders. So when I hear people say, oh, just get a microphone and follow your passion and, money will fall from heaven, I was like, okay, I don't want to be the guy that is kind of get off my lawn, or I'm not here to just pee in your Cheerios, but let's talk real podcasting here. And so I mentioned the fact that it's not the reason that I'm not married anymore, but it was definitely a factor when I'm so passionate about helping people that my ex-wife is jealous of my podcast. That's a problem. And I did many things to try to solve that, but in the end that's a long story, but anyway, there's that. And just the fact that it does take time to do this right. I mean, I could fart into my microphone right now into this. Well, not on the microphone. That'd be weird. But
please don't.
Yeah. The phone, I could fart into that and it would be on Apple by tomorrow. So creating a podcast is not hard. Creating a good podcast, though, takes a little thought and effort. And I thought, well, let's just talk about this. And then in the process of researching mental health entrepreneur, I got hit with a flood of stuff that's like, oh, did you know that entrepreneurs have this really high suicide rate? And I was like, well, I wasn't going to talk about that, but since we're here and we're kind of trying to be real, my biggest worry was that people are going to think, oh, look, Dave's playing the vulnerable card. He's going to peel back the curtain. Ooh, look. And I was like, no, I don't talk about this stuff because who wants to hear about this all the time? But it is kind of a special occasion. So let's take a second to be a little more real. And I just realized that either A, the people that tuned in to hear about bandwidth, downloads, and microphones are going to go, this is awful. And then other people might go, oh, wait a minute. This is my I hate to say fans, my audience, my listeners, people that like to listen to Dave Jackson have emailed me and said, that was like a really cool episode because you told the truth. And I was like, well, that's one of the things I've been saying this year. I think one of the things that is going to be a real problem in the world, not just America, we're going to lose track of the truth because as much as I love to believe in science, science used to have one guy do a test and then he would hand his findings over to another scientist who would do the same test and say, I got the same results. And that doesn't seem to happen anymore. It's just like, oh, I did this test. Of course, it was funded by the people behind me. And it turns out that this report says those people are great. And I'm like, wait, time out on that. So I decided to pull back the curtain and it was awkward. It was kind of weird, but I was like, well, it's the whole point of this. We're going to break format and do something different and we'll see what happens. When you do something different, you're either going to end up with a great success if you're trying to have some sort of goal or something like that, or a great story, which is also kind of a success. So I just thought, well, it's time to break format. And it's one of those things you start, you're like, hey, I'm going to break my format every 100 episodes. I'm going to do something different. Not realizing that you're going to do that 8 times. Like I'm already going, what am I going to do on 900? I'm running out of ideas. So that was the thought behind that.
Let's talk a little bit about the breaking format, because you did a few interesting things. And I definitely want to talk about the mental health aspect. But before we do, you did go into a decent amount of detail about your second marriage. You said that it's not easy to be married and have a podcast. What does that mean exactly?
There's a dopamine kick. There it has to be. I know there is, because I had a woman who called me up and said, I want to start a podcast. Technology hates me. I'm never going to do this, but I want you to help me. And I went, oh, we can do it. And she called me up months later. Dave, I'm in iTunes. I can't do it. You said I could do it. I'm in iTunes. I was like, I told you. That was I like money. That was such a huge, to take somebody from, I can't do this, to holy cow, I'm doing it. That's hard to do. And once you do it, you want to do it again. It's like a good roller coaster ride. You're like, ooh, I've done that now. And you get confident. So the other problems then when you are married, and it doesn't matter what your job is, we decided to have date night, which is a great idea, by the way. You just tell your kids, hey, guess what? Hamburger helper, whatever you want. It's yours. Have fun. We're going to date night. And if we really wanted to get crazy, and this is nuts, we would leave our phones in the car and it would just be us two. The problem is when you have date night so that you could reconnect together, what you don't want to do is argue about the other 6 days of the week. You want to be the best kind of partner you can so that the person on the other side of the table wants to spend more time with you. You're like, oh, I missed that. I want more of that. Let's have 2 date nights. Instead, if you have a date night and all you do is complain about the other 6 days, you're like, okay, is date night over yet? I want to go back and help people. So it can be kind of tough. And the other thing I've noticed, said the guy who has lost track of how many podcasts he has, when you do one, you want to start a second one and a third and a fourth and things like that. And before you know it, and that's easy to fall into because you're like, oh, well, I know how to make a podcast. And you do, and you know how to publish it in the whole iTunes and Apple and all that stuff. The problem is making a podcast is not hard. Making a good one is. And part of that is then marketing it. And that's the problem. There's still only 24 hours a day, and you're still trying to market the first podcast. And now you got to market the second one. And unless you got a team helping you, that gets a little crazy. So it's It's kind of an addictive hobby, I guess, is the same way maybe golf is, right? If you had a really good round, you want to go out and do another one. It can be a little tricky. And I've tried, I know when I was with my second wife, I tried to start a podcast with her, hoping she would then get the bug and understand, it's like, here, honey, the first one's free, but it can be tricky depending on who you're married to. And it takes any kind of marriage. It's all about communication. And apparently I've failed twice in that. So.
We are talking with Dave Jackson. He's a Hall of Fame award-winning podcaster at the School of Podcasting. We are talking about podcasting as a metaphor for doing difficult things. We're going to take a short break. I'm Doc G, and this is the Earn and Invest podcast. Hey, everybody. I just wanted to remind you that if you're enjoying the Earn and Invest podcast, there are a few other ways in which you can interact with our community. The first is our Facebook group. This is the place where we discuss all our episodes of personal finance, today's headlines. Just go to earnandinvest.com/Facebook. Again, that's earnandinvest.com/Facebook. While you're there, you can also go to earnandinvest.com. That is my website where you can find all of our old episodes, some blog posts, as well as video content. We'd love to see you there. You can join our newsletter. Also, my new website, jordangrummett.com, that's JORDANGRUMET.com, is now live, and there you can go to find out everything about the book launch, which is scheduled for August 2022. My book, Taking Stock, is about the confluence of my knowledge as a personal finance podcaster as well as end of life as a hospice doctor. I talk about the stories, what I've learned from taking care of people as they've neared death and what that has taught them about money and happiness. Check us out at any of these places, and I'd love to see you become part of our community. Now back to the show. We are talking to Dave Jackson. He just released episode 800 of the School of Podcasting, and we are talking about doing difficult things. Dave, before the break, we discussed this idea of mental health in podcasters, as well as we see the same problem in entrepreneurs. It's kind of an isolating process going out and building your first podcast. Why do you think it leads to mental health problems?
I think part of it is, especially for me when I first started, nobody else was doing a podcast. So there was nobody. One of the things that really, like when you went to that first podcast conference and you didn't have to explain what a podcast was to somebody, you were like, I'm with my tribe. And so it's still kind of that way. Even if people understand what a podcast is as a listener, they don't know what it is to make one. And so there are times when you want to vent that, the stupid recorder didn't work and I ran out of room on the SD card and all. Like nobody understands that. And so I think that can be kind of isolating when you are in Facebook groups. And for the record, everyone lies about their stats. I know because I see their stats and they go, we've got 4,000. I'm like, no, you don't. I just looked. So I don't know why that is, but that's a thing that happens. So the whole comparing people to other people can I've seen people that will literally say, I can't believe I got 300 downloads on my last episode. This is amazing. And I'm like, holy cow, that's like 15 classrooms of people. That would be half a building in my old place. And they're like, I can't believe I did this. I'm so glad I started this. Somebody will walk by and lie about their stats. And that same person turns into the witch of the Wizard of Oz and just, I'm melting. Like, wait. Like literally 2 minutes ago, you were ecstatic that you had 300 downloads. And that just kills me. So that's something can do that. And I think it's a lot of it. I think we come in with unrealistic expectations, which I've done on multiple shows that I've like, I started a show about customer service and I had this delusions of grandeur where I had a background. I'd won an award in customer service. I'm going to start this show. I'm going to go into businesses and be a consultant. and I did about 5 episodes, and I realized on the 5th episode, I sounded like a grumpy old man. I was just like, I went into McDonald's today and nobody even said hello. And I was just like, okay. And I wasn't having any fun. It really wasn't what I was about. And this is not a myth. Most people do about 7 episodes and they quit, because by then you're like, well, I thought I was going to be this customer service guru, and people be calling me now to come in and share my awesome knowledge with their company. And of course, I haven't made any phone calls yet. I'm expecting them to call me, and I haven't been on Jimmy Fallon yet. It's like all this stuff. And I think that's sometimes the stuff that sucks the wind out of us a little bit.
You mentioned some information on episode 800 about suicide rates and depression, and also talked about impulsivity. And what's the connection between impulsivity and podcasters? And I think we see this also in entrepreneurs that kind of puts us at risk.
Yeah. Well, I said we have 1 episode, and then all of a sudden we go, you know what? I'm going to start a second one. And this one's going to be, and we don't stop to think, is that a good idea? Like, do we really, have we come up with a business plan for that yet? But boy, we jump into it. And, I'm talking into a brand new microphone that I needed like a hole in the head, but it was on sale, So I think we're a little impulsive. And I think part of that comes from creativity, maybe. You're like, because you want to go, what would happen if this did? Then this. So we try things before we think about them, I think, in some cases. Or we go, hey, if nothing else, you'll get a good story out of it. So you jump into it. And I think we forget, especially about the fact that there's only 24 hours in a day. If we have a family of some sort, that the extra time that it's going to take to do whatever this new project is, you forgot to maybe fly that by your family. And so you're cutting in that time out. And so that's when you do the whole, well, I'll just sleep when I'm dead. Okay, well, now you're going to make even worse decisions because you're sleep deprived. So I think that whole, I'll sleep when I'm dead, I'm going to hustle, I think that just leads us into a bad place where all of a sudden we've painted ourselves into the corner. And for us to admit, oh, maybe I shouldn't have started that 4th podcast as we drink our 12th can of Red Bull. And for me to get out of this corner, I have to go, okay, I made some bad decisions. And if we do that, well, then I'll lose my credibility and all this other stuff. And it's like, so we go, well, and then we get depressed because we're mad because, well, who made the bad decisions? We did. I did. Doggone it. I made another bad decision. And so I think that's where those things kind of come hand in hand that can lead us into the corner. And like I said, I see some really bad advice out there. When I see the whole hustle, I don't see that as much as I used to, but I like Gary Vee. He's an interesting guy, but there was a time when I was like, dude, you seem to be Captain Hustle and, do this and that. And I was like, I get that. I understand that there are people that need a little nudge, but when they're already doing everything they can, sometimes it's just going to take a little longer for that dream to get to you, but at least you'll be there to experience the dream as opposed to nobody.
You mentioned Gary Vee, and that reminds me of this whole idea of the comparison culture. You make the point in that episode about how comparison is the thief of joy. Tell me how that sometimes makes hard things harder. I mean, when it comes to podcasting, what do you think comparison does to people? I mean, you mentioned it a little bit already, right? You talked about this whole comparing different numbers of downloads, but how does it affect people in general?
Well, usually because of something, you started off the show with your story about your father. I mean, one of the things that literally this was 50 years ago. And I sat next to a guy named Mark in 1st grade, and Mark had a birthday party and everyone got invited except me. Now, because my mom was my mom, she called and got a ticket. Right. But to this day, I'm kind of like, was that a mistake? Or like, did Mark just seriously just cheese me off and just like, and once I finally got over that, in 2nd grade, I had a crush on Andrea. It's Valentine's Day. Everybody gets a Valentine, right? Everybody knows that way. Nobody feels left out. And I went through all my Valentines and I had one from everyone except Andrea. And those, and like, look, it's whatever, who cares? It's a Valentine, right? You kind of like, Valentine. But yet there's that little voice that anytime something that you need to put yourself out there, you need to be a little courageous. All those little things that for whatever reason bugged you are going to come back and go, are you sure you want to do that? Because, Andrea didn't give you a Valentine. And you're like, oh, shut up. But there's that little seed in your head. So I think that's part of it, that it's the same thing with podcasting. I could have a bazillion, 5-star. I have, I don't know, however many 5-star reviews in Apple Podcasts, but I can quote like scripture the 1-star review, right? A really bad show for a really bad advertisement for a really bad show. I have it memorized. So we love to hang on to that negative stuff so that we can tear ourselves down. It's like, wait, I need more baggage to carry. Give me another 50 pounds on my back as I try to climb this mountain? I don't know why we do it. I just know we do it. And that's the hard part of going, wait a minute, I started a folder in my Gmail. So if somebody sends me some really nice words, I put it there because there are going to be times when I'm trying to let go of the baggage on my back and I can. And if I start to read those, it kind of helps a little bit. Like, okay, I can't be that bad because Susan said I was good and Mark said I was okay. And, so I don't know why we are that way. I think there are two things. You either have parents who maybe didn't give you enough hugs and we've all been there. And then you also have one of the reasons I move forward, my grandma convinced me that I'm going to do great things. Like, she's like, you cannot lose. Now, this is funny because Andrew Jackson, really not a great president, but she's like, your middle name is Andrew. Your first name is David. He was a king in the Bible. She's like, you are destined for great things. And as a 6-7-year-old kid, you go, all right, cool. Thanks, Grandma. Didn't know that. I'm going to write that down. So it's funny. So you have one end that's convinced you that you can't do anything. And you have another side that's convinced you that you'll never lose. So it's a matter of trying to balance that and realize that there are those times when, things don't work out. One of the things I did, I've been divorced twice. And in both cases, I sat down for a good year before I even thought about dating again to go, let's make sure we can wring as much information out of this before we go back in. The one thing I learned after my second divorce, and I didn't know it until I had been married twice, I'm attracted to people who I feel need help because I'm a teacher and I like to help people. And then I want to help them and change them from the way they are. And the problem is people don't really change much. So if you married somebody that smokes, there's a really good chance that they're going to smoke pretty much for the majority of the marriage. So it gets tough that way. But if you do something and it's not entirely as successful as you want, okay, well, that's good. But let's figure out what we can gain from it. So maybe you didn't succeed in the goal, but you did succeed in learning something new that can help you achieve something else.
I think back to my introduction, what drives me so often is that sense of not feeling good enough, because I think as a child, I really struggled with dealing with my father's death. And then hearing you talk about your relationship issues with this idea of finding people who need help because you have this need, this deep inner need to teach. It makes me realize that when we do hard things, we often run afoul of our own deeply held beliefs. We've already talked about the fact that monetization is not a great way to define success in podcasting. Apparently, neither is comparison. So what are some kind of good, healthy ways to define success if you're a new podcaster, or for that matter, doing anything kind of new that you're passionate about?
Well, when you start a podcast, there are a couple, monetization might be one of them. In some cases, if you're doing a podcast and you're just trying to get the message out about something, when you hear somebody say, hey, I learned this on your podcast, you are succeeding. If you are doing a podcast because you just want to talk about Batman in the basement and your cousin comes over and you do an episode talking about Batman and you're in the basement, congratulations, you have a very successful show. So there are all sorts of ways to do that. I think what I see a lot of is some podcasters that don't have huge numbers, but are their hosts consider themselves successful, is they have found a audience that's underserved. And so I have a member of the School of Podcasting right now. She's married to a guy who's in the final stages of Alzheimer's. And she's like, I'm going to start a podcast about Alzheimer's, but it's going to be for the spouses of the patient. She's like, and I said, that's great. I said, because there are a bunch of people, the only people that know what that's like are the people that are in the exact shoes that you're in. There's a show called Adoptees On by Haley Radke. And I every time I say this, I just want to cry, but there are people that spend years looking up their birth parents only to find them and be rejected again. And I was like, wait, what? Because that's not the way it was on the Hallmark Channel. But the only people that know what that's like are people that are in those shoes. So I'm seeing these kind of smaller groups, but I always say podcasting is more like cable TV than it is radio, right? Cable TV has Animal Planet and ESPN 7, right? Featuring some obscure sport, the Weather Channel, the Baking Channel. None of these have giant numbers like, NBC, ABC, and CBS. But there are people, I have a friend of mine that just is addicted to the Weather Channel. And I'm like, the Weather Channel? He's like, oh, you got to watch. Their graphics are amazing. And I was like, okay. So I think sometimes podcasters, when we think of the Joe Rogans of the world and getting a zillion downloads and things like that, number one, don't forget that Joe Rogan started his career in 1989. So he did not start it last week. But we see these big, giant numbers. And I'm like, well, that's okay if you brought an audience like Joe did, and maybe if you were on TV multiple times like Joe was, and you were a comedian like Joe is, So let's be realistic and find that audience that I think so many times we start a podcast and we try to find an audience. Let's think about, is there an audience out there that needs a podcast? I think that sometimes would be a better way to go.
I want to talk a few minutes about your experience podcasting over the years. There was a particular point in that 800th episode where you talked about your mom dying when you were 24. And you said something to the extent of, I wish I could have had a do-over, but I was 24 years old. And now I know better because, I'm in my 50s, et cetera. Let me compare that to podcasting. Is there anything you wish that you could have a do-over on the kind of evolution of your podcasting?
Yeah. When I started off, again, there wasn't any money in it. And so for a while, if somebody said, do you know anybody that could edit this podcast? I'd be like, yeah, me. And I would do that. And after a while, as I was at that point, I was putting myself through school and I was like, and I started giving that stuff to friends. I'm like, oh, my friend John's an editor. John, here, have a free customer. And John was like, wow, that's great. If I know anybody that needs consulting, I'll send them your way. Well, the problem is people of John's customers, if they want any consulting, they kind of want it from John. They've got the relationship with John, and not that I'm not a bad consultant, but I should have set up a deal with John to say, hey, for every person I send, let's say you charge them $60 an episode. Can I get 10 of that or something? Like some kind of, let's turn this into a business that's ongoing. That's one that I've done with multiple different things at the beginning that I'm like, man, if I had done that for 16 years, that would have added up a little bit. Said the guy that literally just bought a microphone. I have another drawer. I can see 4 right now sitting here, microphones and I preach all the time. It's not the tech, because you know why? It's not the tech. But I do realize that I kind of like the way my voice sounds a little more with this, which makes you feel a little more confident. But when I started off, I went through just boatloads of gear, and I wouldn't even had this except they had 3 months same as cash. And who can turn that down, doggone it, on a financial podcast? I feel embarrassed to say that. Any other redos? Maybe, like I said, I've started too many podcasts. Many of them I start to test stuff. Like I do a podcast called the Podcast Rodeo Show, and I had no time for a new podcast. But there was a new player in the space, and I was like, I really want to see how that works. So I created a podcast that needs no prep. And I just grab a random podcast and then I tell you what I think about it. And that kind of stuff, again, impulsive, not really thought through, that you kind of end up painting yourself into a corner. So I think sometimes I wish I wasn't quite so impulsive. And it's weird because on one hand, I would say I don't have a ton of self-confidence, but on the other hand, I do stuff because I think I'm Superman. And I'm like, oh, I'll figure it out. So I need to find that balance. And that, again, when we talk about doing hard things, I think that's it. Because sometimes you need to press the gas, but not that far. And sometimes you need to hit the brake, but not that hard. And it's that fine dance of how do I maybe think about this, make sure it's a good idea, then move, as opposed to, ooh, that looks like a good idea. Yep, I think so. I mean, my very first entrepreneurial thing I had done, I made these self-starting CDs that when you put them in, it would give you like the history of Dave Jackson. At the end, there was a quiz that would say, question A, call and schedule an interview with Dave Jackson. Answer B, call and schedule an interview with Dave Jackson. And it worked. I got hired. And so I went and put these online. It's the digital resume, and had this whole website made and this whole 9 yards. And then I did market research. Again, the impulsive thing, right? I did market research and found out that not only did I not invent the digital resume, but there were a lot of people that were doing it a lot better and a lot cheaper. So I think that's, again, part of being creative is I think what fuels the impulsiveness maybe sometimes. You're like, oh, that sounds like fun. That'll be great. And then you don't realize that you're burning an asset to do that. And that's your time and things of that nature. So sometimes, and I think that's the hard part. How do you go fast, but not too fast? How do you go forward smart, but not have a paralysis through analysis? They're all, it's a balance.
For me, Dave, the most joyous part of podcasting is that exhilarating feeling I get and somewhat the fear right before I hit that record button. What is it for you? What's the most joyous part?
The most joyous part. It's funny because you mentioned that. I can tell when I'm not super confident with my material because I will be eating Raisin Bran at 12:30 at night. And I'm like, why am I in the kitchen? I'm not hungry. I'm like, I'm a little nervous about hitting publish on this. For me, it's weird because it usually happens the opposite. Like my 800th episode, I knew there were going to be some people that were going to say, that was really cool. It wasn't going to be everybody, but I knew the people that it resonated with, it was going to resonate even more. So when I put that out and literally the next day I woke up and there were 3 emails in my inbox that said, that was really cool. Because number one, it'd only been out for 8 hours. So the fact that they even found it, this was somebody who subscribed and got it. So it's like, oh, cool. Now I know your name because I know who a listener is. So when I'm talking to my invisible friend across the table, I can put your name there next time. That's always fun. When you put something out that you go, I'm pretty sure they're going to like this. And then you get instant feedback that, yeah, we like that. That was really, really cool. Because usually it's the opposite. It's the ones that I put out that I go, I think this is okay. Like I'm getting ready to do an episode about the Beatles Get Back and how it applies to podcasting. And that's not going to resonate with everybody. And I'm pretty sure tomorrow when I hit publish, I'm like, okay, I hope that's good enough. And that may be one that just resonates with other people. And I have done shows where I'm like, they are going to love this. And I hit publish and it's just nothing but crickets. So it's always kind of fun when you do the one and you go, I think, man, I'm happy to give them this. And then you wake up the next morning and you've already gotten feedback. That's cool. That just lets you know, hey, what I am doing some things right, apparently.
Dave, I just wanted to thank you for coming on the show. We're talking about doing things that are hard. Podcasting is certainly one of them. And I think about your evolution and trajectory of 800 episodes and realize that if you had quit, if you hadn't done this hard thing, I certainly wouldn't be having this conversation with you today, but also the quality of my podcasting wouldn't have been as good. Maybe I wouldn't have stuck with it. Maybe I wouldn't have found as much joy as I do today. Part of that has come from listening to your wisdom. So thank you for putting it out there. I want to end this episode the way I end every episode by asking you what's up next in your life. And certainly if people want to interact with you more, how they can reach out to you. So first and foremost, what is happening with you in the School of Podcasting in the near future? I
don't know if it would be podcasting, like School of Podcasting 2.0. It's probably more like 3.0, but I'm moving to a different platform. Right now I'm using Teachable. Right now I'm using Thinkific. I'm moving to Teachable. And in the process of doing that, I'm updating a huge amount of the videos. Not that they were bad, but like when you're planning your podcast, has a video of you that's square, not rectangle, because it was done in 2006 and your hair was black. You're like, I might want to update that one. That's what's coming up. And I have some ideas. Right now, the School of Podcasting is always open. I'm sniffing the idea cautiously this time that maybe I might do the whole thing where it opens for a little bit, send a group through all at the same time, close the doors, and then open it up like once a quarter kind of thing. I'm sniffing that idea. I'm like, fear of missing out. Okay, it's like, all right, we might try that a little bit. So I'm talking to some people like that. So those are some of the things that are coming up in 2022.
And how can people reach you if they want to learn more or contact you?
Yeah, schoolofpodcasting.com has all my info.
This has been the Earn and Invest podcast. On behalf of myself, Doc G, I wanted to thank Dave Jackson of the School of Podcasting. That's a wrap. Awesome. Now I leave things running just for any after show, any conversation we have. First and foremost, is there anything I missed? Anything you wanted to talk about we didn't?
No. Here are my notes. When you make a mistake and you say, I was going to do the call to action, I would just explain to your people, like, if I make a mistake, I'm going to pause for about 2 seconds and then say the same thing again.
Yeah.
Because if it was me, I was like, "Oh, you're gonna hate yourself when you go to edit that out." Because there's like a half a second there. I was like, just
I didn't leave enough pause. Yeah.
And your intro is amazing. Your the whole make your guest feel like just any kind of anxiety is like, no, just do whatever you want. Don't worry about it.
Thanks.
Yeah, but no, man, it was good.
Yeah, no. I was really happy with the conversation. I feel like I was one of those people who listened to episode 800 and I'm like, this is it, right? So I was one of the people who fell into that category. So I knew immediately I wanted to have that conversation with you because there was just so much good stuff there. Yes, you can't do that episode every day, but
and
once 100 for sure.
It's hard to. I have been called, a curmudgeon because number one, I'm a middle-aged white guy. So like everybody hates me. I'm either a pedophile or, a racist, whatever. And so when I see people come into the space that, in my honest opinion, may not have the best interest of this podcast person who has probably a great message and this and that. And I just like, please don't prey on this person. This is a good person. Please don't come over here and take their money and, tell them to buy a Blue Yeti and money will fall from heaven. So I get at times a little protective, I guess, in a way. And I don't believe I had a great light bulb where I was talking to Mark Bologna, who does a book called Beyond Bourbon Street. And he used to send me people. He was like, hey, if anybody wants a podcast, I'm sending them to you. And I was interviewing for my book and he said, hey, I've got to talk to you about something. This could be kind of awkward. And I go, what? And he goes, well, I sent somebody to you and man, he did a great job. She's got a podcast. And I'm like, okay, where does this get awkward? He goes, I asked her, how was it? And she said, oh, Dave was great. It's amazing. She goes, but I kind of wanted you to teach me. And he said, so if somebody else asked me, he goes, I just want to, is it okay if I teach them? And at first, me 5 years ago would have been, how dare you? Right. And I was like, look, Mark, she's got the relationship with you. She trusts you. Of course she wants you to teach her how to podcast. I said, so I can't teach everybody. I want to, but it's cool. So, and that's one of the things I try to get out of it, but I decided not to get out of it. I took a job at my church to help them do quarterly events. And I actually went to them and said, I don't have time to do this. I really don't have time. And they said, no, it's only once a quarter. And half the reason I took it is because the people that run this church I've known forever. I love them to death, but I have to say hard things to them. And the only reason I took this job is I need more practice in awkward conversations. And I've already had a couple. And it's been fun to go, normally a church that has 112 members can support one pastor. We have 18 members and we have 2.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put that there and let you guys figure out what to do with it. So that's the stuff that gets a little weird. And I just was like, all right, let's talk about this. Because I think part of it too was, the whole the Dave Jackson thing. Like all I do is say, I want to speak. And everybody's like, oh, enter the Dave Jackson. I'm like, no, I get turned down quite a bit, that I just wanted to not be like a pity party. but just like, hey, just so you know, this isn't as easy as it looks.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't come across a pity party.
Yeah, and when I talked to Glenn the weekend before, I said, I'm thinking of doing this, and he's like, oh, he goes, yeah, he goes, we need somebody to tell the truth. Yeah. And he goes, because this, as Glenn put it, he goes, this shit is hard, man. And I go, yes, it is. So, and I sometimes worry that I'm going to be like, oh, don't ask Dave. He'll just say no. He hates everything. And I'm like, no, not everything, but I just want a little realistic, to it. So,
and you know what? A thought, like when someone refers to you as the Dave Jackson, I know, like when I do that, it's to show someone my pure gratitude or belief in their product outside of all those so we have all these traditional ways to say we're famous, we're great, we have a great product, etc. We have downloads, we have how much money we make, etc. I often do that when I'm saying, hey, I have no idea what those numbers are for you. I have no idea if you're beloved or no one knows your name, but to me, you're the guy I would go to when I want the straight shit, right? Yeah. So I know when I do that, it's like what I'm saying to you is, this is my respect and gratitude. I don't care what anyone else says. I know quality. And if you are not the most famous blown up guy in the world, it's because other people don't recognize the quality I'm seeing here. You know what I mean?
Well, I'll take that. That's the one thing I did when I started the podcast Rodeo show, and I would just be honest. Like I had a guy, the last one I just did, he said, my guest has such a wide background. I don't even know where to start. And I hit stop and I go, that's your job. You're introducing the guest. You know who he is. You know who your audience is. Figure out how to introduce this guy. And he said, man, that made me laugh. And I'm like, well, I'm just like, this is because nobody wants to, and I'm not trying, I always say, look, I'm not looking for shows to hate, but everybody, like my show, I'm sure somebody could say, what's this thing with the thing and you just need an outsider point of view. But more and more people said, wow, you're actually saying what I think. And nobody does that. And then I did it once live in Nashville and people lost their mind that I would actually say to someone's face, this whole thing at the beginning where you're talking about French toast, nobody cares. The title of the show was How to Make Money with Audacity. Why are you talking about French toast? Yeah. And people are like, I can't believe you said that. I'm like, well, it's like, I'm trying to help them make a better show. And that's when I started to realize that it was okay to actually voice your opinion, because you can either agree with me or not, and feel free not to listen. But apparently people like it when you voice your opinion, as long as your opinion is go kill everyone or, hate speech, etc. But I was like, all right, maybe I'll start being a little more opinionated and see what happens. You know what you've done really well, which makes it all okay, is you're very clear what your intentions are, right? You say it right up at the top of your show. My intention is to have you make the best show possible where people don't stop at 3 seconds in. Right. Like, so I know that's your intention. So as a listener, I'm like, okay, that's Dave's intention. So if he does give me the straight stuff, right, like I'm much more likely to say, okay, that's coming from a good place, because Dave wants me to have a fantastic show. Dave is not saying this to cut me down. He's not saying it because he wants to have his show be more popular than mine. Dave is saying this because he truly, and you've been real clear about that. Yeah. I always try to explain my why too. Like, I'm like, here's why I think this is a bad idea. Yada, 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 yada. Now, if this is wrong, if I'm basing my opinion on something that I'm not aware of, please let me know. I'll be happy to change my opinion. But right now, I just think it's this, and that. And when I know that, why would I do this? And people go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I understand why you think that now. So, and believe it or not, as much as I love your podcast, I don't listen to all your advice, which means, again, everybody has the right to listen and take out what means something for them in their position. So, for instance, there's some things that I probably do that I've heard you say, you may or may not want to do that, but I find that it works with what I'm doing at the time. And Bingo. So, yeah, but I would be much worse off if I had never heard that opinion. Right. So now I can actually question and say, okay, does this really add to my show? Because Dave is saying it's probably not that important. And now I have to go look at my show and say, well, does it add? Does it not add? Does it distract? Am I stopping the flow of my show? And that process is invaluable, whether I go with your final, idea or not. Yeah. The guy was talking about, his show is it was kind of paranormal, witchcrafty stuff. 13 minutes in, after he tells me how his guest was part of the company that came up with Virginia is for Lovers and the Gecko Geico or Geico Gecko.
Yeah.
13 minutes in, this guy's great grandma was hanged as a witch. And I was like, why am I learning about this 13 minutes in? Like you just like, that is the definition of bearing the lead, my friend.
It is so hard. And I have to tell you, Joe's helped me a lot with this, but it is hard for newbies, people who haven't been doing this for a long time, to know how, and I struggle with it all the time, to grab people and pull them in right away, but then also have an arc of a story that makes sense. Right. And I definitely struggle with that. Like, and you can tell by how I started our podcast. It's like, I know I got to ask you something deep and worthwhile, dig in the beginning, or at least the story does that a little bit too. But like, I feel like that first question has to have some fangs, but then I feel like I also have to back off and then really start making an arc of how I want the story to go. But I agree. It's hard. It's hard to know, like, when do you when do you drop the bomb? And I've had one show that I did for Joe where we dropped the bomb at the end and it was planned that way. But yeah, it's hard to know when to put that in and to time it right.
And the flow is just tough. Like if you want people to hear something, you kind of need to stick it up front. And you're like, yeah, but I want to get to the content. I'm like,
no one's going to get to the content if they're not engaged in the beginning.
Yeah. So it's like, well, okay, well, I'll put this in the middle and then maybe near the end. And if nobody takes action, then definitely next week it's going up front kind of thing. So yeah, it's tricky. That's why ads are tricky.
Yeah, and I do something that Joe hates is I read in a break. He does not like that. But for me, I'm a big fan. So
you will thank yourself when you start using dynamic.
Yeah. Exactly. So I'm a big fan of Terry Gross and I love Fresh Air, and they always read their ads in, and now they're a big program. I mean, obviously they have lots of followers, but I like the way it sounds. So ultimately I decided I'm going to read my ads in that way. But Joe will be like, I hate when you do that. He's like, I hate how you interrupt the flow for it, et cetera. But for me, that's my, what.
Yeah, but doesn't he? I mean, they have a trivia question.
I know. Yeah. That's his way of doing it in a more, and he's taken the advice. So being on Stacking Benjamins, I'm on their creative team. So Joe and I talk about podcasting all the time. So when you've in a few episodes talked about some people who do a really good job of continuously changing the flow of their content, right? Where one conversation flows into the next without like a weird break, et cetera.
Right.
And so I think he thinks a lot about that. Like, how do I get the ad in without screwing with the flow of what we're talking about, which is very hard, right? We all need ads. Ads are a necessity if we want to make at least revenue that way. Like someone like Joe, who has tons and tons and tons of listeners,
right?
It's not a bad way for some revenue, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard to do that correctly and not piss someone off. Yeah.
And that's something that when I think about it, I don't think about it enough. And that is, how do I just take the cheap way out. I fade some music in and there's your transition. Okay. Well, that was easy.
Yeah. Which ain't a bad trick,
Well, that's something. See, now I get the answer. If there's one thing I would redo, I would do, which I do now in another podcast. I would have one topic.
Yeah.
Because it's impossible to write a headline for an episode that has 3 things in it.
Yeah.
And then you have to figure out, okay, which one is going to resonate the most, which then makes you think, well, then why am I doing the other 2? It's that's just something I hate
titling my podcast. Hate it. That's another one Joe's always on me because I lose listeners just because I don't title the podcast well enough. But it's constantly a struggle with me is how to title them with the right amount of flair, but be true to what you're actually talking about, as opposed to just kind of a shit show of putting something up there because it's going to get out.
It's I've been using this tool called Headliner Studio. It's from CoSchedule, and they have all this AI SEO, like you should add more feeling words, and I get done and I'm like, okay, I got to score 86. That's pretty good. And then I'm like, except that phrase would never come out of my mouth. And that's where I'm like, I'm actually going to go with the 77 score because that I understand
authenticity versus
Well, I had a guy do an SEO audit of my site, and he goes, "You have really good SEO." He goes, "What tool do you use?" I go, "I write for people." I go, I think about the one person who really needs to know that. He goes, so you're not using like SEMrush or I'm like, no, actually, I'm pretty stupid when it comes to SEO. I know a little bit, about this and that. And I know how to look up my ranking. And he's like, okay. He's like, cause I was going to like, he goes, we'd be happy to help you with this, but I just want to let you know you're doing really good. And here are some things you could do to tweak this. But I think it was Todd Cochran I talked to once. And he said that he'd gone through a similar thing. He goes, I just write for people. And he goes, because I think we also know like the real clickbaity for me, when I see like just dripping clickbaity title, I kind of go, oh, somebody's trying to sell me something here.
Yeah.
Like there's why are you trying so hard?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When the title is just naked Pam Anderson, Pam Anderson, naked. I remember it's like, wait, isn't this a show about podcasting? So
when you drop the worry about the downloads, that helps, right? Because then you start saying, well, forget getting eyes. Let's actually write in here what's helpful to the person who's going to be listening to this, right?
Yeah.
Who do I actually want to attract to listen to this episode? And then that's a whole different, right? If you can drop that, if you can say, the downloads are whatever they are, what actually makes sense here for people? Yeah.
My downloads always go down in February because in January they go through the roof because everybody that wants to start a podcast is like, this is the year. And so in February, my numbers went down, but the membership went up.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, you know what? That's
ding, 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 ding.
Yeah. That's like, so yeah. And it is weird because there is a time like the other thing. See, now that I'm thinking about my answers, I don't know that the School of Podcasting is niche enough because come January, I will do a very 101 kind of win one for the Gipper. Let's start a podcast. And then somewhere in that year, I'm going to do something that's pretty like, okay, you've got a podcast. Here's how you grow it kind of thing. And that's two kind of separate audiences.
Yeah.
And I always know when I do something like that, I'm like, the already podcasting guy's going to skip this one. I'm like, well, that's all right. I'm going to talk to this person. And I was like, I've got artwork somewhere. I have a show about just growing your podcast. And I was like, yeah, we don't have enough time for that. That's going to require more research. And I was like, I like the idea, but no. So it's tricky.
Yeah, I suffer with that too. Like Earn and Invest. I mean, talk about a huge title right there, right? That can have anything. And every time I try to niche down, I'm like, but I love having these broad conversations. And I'm like, I can't let go of it. So it's like, okay, I'll trade it for the fact that I'm going to get people who listen to some and don't listen to others. But when I look at the sum total of the conversations I want to have, they're really broad. And that's just my personality. So either you're going to get me and maybe slightly less successful, or you're going to get inauthentic me and more successful. I'm going with authentic me, and at some level, it is what it is.
Well, that's it. I got to meet one of my co-hosts. He's in Nebraska, so I think I've met him in person like 3 times. And we're at Podfest or Podcast Movement or something, and we're talking. And he goes, "You know what's really cool?" And I go, "And he goes, you are exactly in person the same way you are on a microphone." I go, "Dude, you don't realize that, but that's like one of the best compliments you can give any podcaster." Because there was a guy I was talking with, and he was going to do something and he went to record something. And look, when I talk on a microphone, I have a little more energy, but he was like off the, like, he was like, all of a sudden he was like, okay, well now we're going to talk about that. And I was like, wait. And he got done. I go, why are you talking like that?
Broadcaster voice.
Yeah. And it was very John Lee Dumas inspired, it was like just stoked. And I was like, I like energy. I go, but like, you really flipped the switch there. And he's like, well, that's the way I talk. And I go, on mic. And he's like, yeah. And I go, okay, I'm just letting you know. I'm like, that's so. And again, you be you, man. If that's what you want to do on mic, you do it. You will not get you sound exactly the same off mic as you do on. Cause I was like, whoa.
That's what I love about Joe too. Joe is very much in person how he is on mic. Very authentic. When
Joe's in Ohio, we usually meet at a Bob Evans and just laugh for 45 minutes straight. Yeah. He is so.
Yeah, he's a funny guy.
Yeah. There's a guy that I love people that are super serious about their craft and yet can have a ball of fun doing it. Mm-hmm. That's the perfect mix. So there's a guy that, and I'm going to write that down. Okay. There's another Beatles thing. because those guys had a ton of time, but they were serious about it. So that, and it shows.
Yeah.
And I
totally shows.
And I remember once I was talking to him about how he came up with his rates, and he goes, I just kept raising them until somebody said no. He goes, because I didn't want to leave any money on the table. And I was like, okay, that is so simple and yet brilliant. It's like, because nobody wants to hear that no. So they just, I'm like, no, it's not going to kill you. You only have to hear it once or twice, and then you just pop it down a little. You'll be fine. So.
Yeah, that's why I really enjoyed your 2 episodes with Joe. That was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to listen to. Now, granted, I like your show and I like Joe, so I was going to like it anyway, but it was good stuff.